All right, today we're going to be talking about inspections, reports. There's sort of a difference between the two. I mean, there are inspection reports and then there's reports that don't really involve inspections, but maybe they do. I'm focusing on the big ones that real estate agents would need to know about. Plus and by that I mean the termite, also known as the wood destroying organisms report, the property inspection, the NHD. We're probably going to touch a little bit on the prelim, but there's only, so much I can do. You'll notice in the handout that I've provided, I have links to a session that I did with an escrow officer on how to read a prelim, and another one with a person from an NHD company on how to read an NHD report, as well as one on how to read a property inspection. So for those of you that are thirsting for, more knowledge, go for it. I'm also going to cover something that is of particular interest to me, which is also called local area disclosures. So to begin with, I'm going to share my screen. And this is a copy of the handout. And these are the different reports, some of which are regulated, some not so much, some not at all, right? So property inspectors are regulated by the Business and Professions Code. The termite companies, and I'll explain what we really mean by that. And I'm expecting if there's a chat that I need to respond to, that somebody, Erica or probably Erica, or maybe Angela, will shout at me. Or you can just shout at me.
Yeah, I'll let you know, Mike.
What?
I'll let you know.
All right, I'll bet. Thank you. So wood destroying organisms reports are regulated by the State Structural Pest Control Board, the SPCB. NHD reports are kind of regulated, but not so much under the civil code. Prelims and that sort of thing comes from title companies. And then we're going to spend some time looking at local POS. And no, it doesn't stand for what you're thinking. That's not what it stands for. It stands for point of sale. And let me stop people from, how do I stop people from calling me when I'm in a class? All right. So we're talking about this in two different contexts. One is, let's say you're a listing agent. Now, if you're in Silicon Valley, San Mateo County, much of San Francisco, Santa Clara County, southern Alameda County, and I've also noticed that in the Southern California coastal, like Carlsbad and places like that, what you're going to find is that most of the sellers, or many of the sellers, have already collected all these reports and inspections. And in Silicon Valley, it is virtually, I think it's like 90% of the time, they have, if not all, most of the inspections and reports. And the reason that that's a recommended practice if you represent a seller is because you would prefer, if you're selling the property, to have the buyer make a non-contingent offer. If you don't have a termite in the property and an NHD and all that other kind of stuff, HOA documents, then you can't expect the buyer to make a non-contingent offer unless the house is an obvious tear down, and no one cares how many termites there are because they're all going to die when they bulldoze the building down, right? So that if you don't have this and you represent the seller, it means the buyer is going to make a contingent offer, an investigation contingency. And I quote again, I say this often in the classes, this is the precise wording of the residential purchase agreement as it relates to the investigation contingency. It says, buyer's acceptance of the condition of the property and any other matter affecting the property is a contingency of this agreement. That essentially is saying if they find something they don't like, they can back out of the contract, get their deposit back. Nothing you can do about it if you're the seller, which is why if you represent the seller, there's a big advantage to having all this done in advance, completely done, so that the buyer doesn't make a contingent offer because you've already done everything. And that's particularly true if there's going to be multiple offers. But you leave Silicon Valley and some parts of the coast where there's a much more of a demand, people just don't bother to do this. And then we're arguing, debating about repairs in the middle of the transaction. So general property, these are the property inspections would destroy. We're going to go through some examples, I believe. And in my folder, which I shared with you, which one should I do first? I don't know. I'll do it in this order. The traffic light system, all right? So the red circle means, stop. It usually means a lender is going to stop or there's some other reason. Do not remove your contingency, right? This could escalate it. These are items that could kill escrow. An example would be standing water in the crawl space where there's horizontal or vertical, there are cracks in the foundation, where there's evidence that water is able to get under the foundation. Now, yeah, that's in the inspection reports, but do we really know what's going on here and how much it'll cost to fix it? So if I were the listing agent and my report said stuff like that, I would certainly recommend that we get a structural engineer to come out and look at it and tell us what is wrong with the foundation. Why is there water there? What can we do to fix it? Do we need a sump pump? Do we need a French drain? And what would that cost? And once I get the bid, I would put that in there too. But you understand that just seeing things like foundation problems and water under the house, that's a stop sign, right? You better be very careful because the foundation work could be $30,000-$50,000. We would like to find out before you've committed yourself to buying the property. Yellow may be a high budget item. And green is just some maintenance thing. There's wood chips around the outside of the house, which is like, throwing bird feed, but for termites, we could do something about that. Civil Code Section 2079, which we've discussed before, and you all know, of course, that 2079 is the section in the Civil Code that discusses real estate agents' obligation to conduct a reasonably prudent visual inspection of the property. You already knew that. And so some of this, if it's obvious, should appear there. The general property inspection. Now, active safety hazards, exposed wiring, gas leak, structural failure. A lot of the different property inspectors will highlight these differently. Sometimes they will say, they'll have it in red and they'll say this is a major one. We're going to look at some real life property inspections, right? I have some samples in the folder, but we're going to go to the internet and look at some that we've downloaded where we've got actual transactions going on right now. You want to see what they did not inspect. Sometimes they don't, right? Like the chimneys aren't as big of an issue as they used to be because people generally aren't burning, and in many areas you're not allowed to. But people would say, well, the property inspector inspected the chimney. And I'm like, nah, no, they really didn't. Well, it says on the report they inspected the chimney. And I would say, did you meet the property inspector? They'd say, well, yeah. Nice, clean outfit, right? They probably had a little uniform and had their name on it, right? And but it was a clean uniform. I've seen masonry inspectors, they do not look clean. because they crawl into the chimney to look around. All that property inspector is going to do is turn on the flashlight and look up and say, oh, I don't see anything wrong. Right? So you need to look and see what they didn't do. Right? And sometimes they don't do a pool inspection. Sometimes the roof inspection is simply they're standing on the ground looking at the roof. That's all that they do. You understand they don't always inspect everything, right? Even though they say they do, they don't always inspect everything. Unpermitted additions, we'll talk about other ways of figuring that out. Yellow items, green items, and then there's a checklist I put together. Now, inspectors are generally required to, they have membership in the different inspector organizations, right? By the way, anybody can be a property inspector. Now, you understand if you don't have to be a licensed contractor. You just have to get people to pay you to do it. You can, get certified, whatever. And then we have a video from CalPro, which I will admit is the inspection company I use most of the time. And this is a video, it's an hour long going through property inspections and what to look out for. Smoke, CO2, smoke detectors, CO2 mandatory items. These are things that you just need to know are required. Now, I've had agents say, well, this is, a successor trust, somebody died, we're an exempt seller, we don't have to have a carbon monoxide detector, we don't have to have the smoke detectors because, we're exempt. The buyer will not get a loan. The appraiser is going to look for that stuff. If it's not there, you're not going to get a loan. And I've had agents, once that reality hit them, go to Home Depot or Lowe's, buy smoke detectors and carbon monoxide detectors, and go put them up at the property. GFCI is ground fault circuit interrupters. You see them, the little red buttons and things like that on the, where you plug in things. And so this is a list of things that may be required. Now I'm going to, other things, what, should I get, maybe I feel like jumping to something that I want to do. So this is a good overall discussion. But I would like to, why don't we take a look at a real one? Would that be okay with you? So which one is this? All right, so this is a property that I think we made an offer on or something like that. I have several examples that I would show you. This one we picked because it's got the whole package pretty much. Now, if you're this is in Southern Alameda County, which is Silicon Valley. So this is one of those where they've got most everything. 9 documents, however, is kind of light, but this disclosure package probably has a whole bunch in it. So what I do, because agents will ask me, well, look at this, tell me what you think, what should I know, right? And so this is what I do, and there's 2 parts to what I do. One part I covered in another video, which is I go into RPR, that's the Realtor's Property Resource. I run comps. I download a complete report. I go into the MLS. I run more comps. I do more research, and all that is about pricing. I'm not going to do that again today. We're just talking about the disclosure package. So I start by downloading the PDFs as a combined PDF. I want the whole package all together. And then what I do, and I have 2 examples, both of which I've run already just to show you. And I'm going to show you a couple of these. But the first one is, this is Gemini. And one of the parts of my handout, which is near the end, if I were redoing it, because I had time, I'd put it near the beginning. But one of the things I put in my handout, I'm looking for a handout, near the end is a prompt. Scroll down here. See this Universal California Real Estate Disclosure prompt. Now, you could put in the address. I mean, I just take the address and paste it in. So first, if I were doing this from scratch, I would go to Gemini, and Gemini seems to be better at this than ChatGPT. I would take the address, which is here. I paste in the address. Oops, this is the whole thing. This is the address in the prompt. I could have just used it. But if I find the address, I don't know which one is it. Maybe if this is the whole thing, there we go. So I found the address. I go like this. I copy the prompt. And I go all the way down here, copy it, paste it in, and either I just hit fast, or if I've got a little bit of time, what I prefer to do is select deep research. And if you're wondering what's the difference, I'll show you. So this is me running the prompt, just letting Gemini do it quickly. And it gives a compliance checklist. It has mandatory things, some of which we may already know. Agents are always arguing about, is there a city transfer tax? Isn't there there's a county transfer tax everywhere in California. But not all cities have a city transfer tax. Fremont does not have a city transfer tax, does not, right? So it told us that there's a county transfer tax, it's all the same. Water conserving fixtures, there's a mandatory disclosure if you're not in compliance. That's just a form. I'll show you another example in a bit. You're supposed to have smoke and carbon monoxide. The water heater is supposed to be braced. You're not supposed to use listing photos. That's not really here. There's the smoking residue applies. There's an electrical notice, and then it has trigger based, which if there's liquefaction, NHD, sewer lateral, there's no sewer lateral because it's a condo townhome, HOA package, etc. And then away it goes, right? And it gives you some links. This is what I get when I do deep research. Now, you can see it looks a lot longer. Now, one of the things that deep research figured out is that there are some cities, Berkeley is an example, that have a rule about the different kinds of, like can you have gas and other things like that, in terms of heating and things like that. And so what this, I'm trying to find it right now, but what they point out in deep research, which I'm going to have to look for, what they point out in deep research is that although Fremont doesn't have that rule, so that doesn't mean that they're going to send somebody out and make you change the gas shutoff valves and all that other kind of stuff. However, it says in Fremont that if you do any renovation to the property, you then have to comply with this rule. Now, what I usually do, because this is so long, you see what I mean? This is kind of long. If I'm dealing with an engineer, I might share the whole thing. And the way I share it is I go up to export and it creates a Google Doc. Now, once you're in deep research, it's hard to get it to stop researching deeply. So what I typically do when I don't want all of that, which is going to take a second because it's tired, is I open up a Gemini prompt without deep research. And I simply attach that long, humongous everything and more than you ever wanted to know. And I say, or we have a buyer interested in this property. And then I might also upload. This is everything, right? What that document is all of the disclosures provided by the seller also into this. So why did I do this first one? And that's because, and I'm going to give you another example in a minute, it's because of local area disclosures. Now, one of the examples I'm going to show you involves Morgan Hill. So agent who's not in Morgan Hill, that's in San Jose, somebody knows somebody in Morgan Hill that wants to sell their house. So the agent says, well, I can list your house. I can do that. I mean, for Santa Clara County, everything's cool. I can be the listing agent. So he lists the house. Buyer makes an offer, it's accepted. Halfway into escrow, the buyer's agent is saying, where's the sewer lateral report? And the agent is like, the what? What are you talking about? Well, the city of Morgan Hill has a requirement for a sewer lateral inspection. Where is it? You know, we can't close escrow without it. Oh, yeah, well, yeah. And so they're scrambling, and it turns out that there's issues with the sewer system that will cost $9,000 to fix. But the agent didn't know because they never sold a house in Morgan Hill, so why would they know? So that prompt that I'm sharing is to dig up all of the local area disclosures that might be triggered by the sale of a property. Even in Alameda County, there's a difference between what's required in Berkeley versus Oakland versus Fremont. Right? San Francisco, different. Los Angeles, different. And so rather than waiting until you're in the middle of escrow and the escrow officer is saying, where's all the stuff? You're missing things we can't close without. You run the prompt first so that you at least know what's coming up. But so I've now identified those local area disclosures. I've now uploaded the whole thing. And I'm going to say, well, we have a buyer interested in this property. See any red flags, issues, estimate any cost to fix. Now, if it was, if I were doing the whole thing, I also would be putting into this comps, what you know, the history of the property, all the other thing. But today we're just looking at disclosures, and I let it run. Anyway. Now, a lot of times I do, like at this point, we're not doing deep research because we already did that and it gave us this huge everything. But now we're trying to narrow it down into an issue. And if this is too long, I'll tell Gemini to rewrite it to generate something that we could show to a client that summarizes the issues. And you can see it's thinking. Now, the reason it's taking its time, and the other example I'm going to run will not take as long, this place has got HOA issues. I mean, it's got HOA. And the part of what Gemini is reading is all of the HOA docs. I have not looked at this one before. There's one that I did for another agent, which I'll show you, and they have huge HOA issues. Like they are going to have a 40-some thousand special assessment per unit coming up. Yeah. That's that's all. So they're going to, and they're gonna have to raise the HOA fees. Of course they are. And if you sell a unit, you're gonna, I mean, you know, you need to know that the HOA should be 70% funded in reserves. It's 17% funded. Right now, this is taking its time. Let me show you while I'm letting it do that. Ah, here we go. Thank you, gentlemen. So key red flags. It's pointing out that there's a Mello-Roos. That's not a, you know, a male chicken taking, you know, Wellbutrin or something like that. It's a type of tax bond, named off anyhow, you don't want to hear the story, but anyhow, it has a high annual tax liability of $15,000 to $16,000. Now, if somebody asks you what is a Mello-Roos, it's a community facilities district. Well, what's that? It's when you understand, in order to raise property taxes, they need a 2/3 vote of the people, right? Which most people are unwilling to do in a county because they don't want their taxes to go up. But Warm Springs, which is a particular area, either they're saying, well, you guys are benefited from the BART station, so we're going to create this little geographic area called a community facilities district, and we're going to tax you because of the transportation, flood control, street lighting, school systems, parks, whatever. So yeah, it's 15 to 16,000, more than double the base 1% property tax. Oh, that's nice. The 2026 inspection noted rust and water stains at the base of the furnace located in the attic. It was reportedly repaired on the 26th. You might want to look at that. It's what it's saying. By the way, I also went to the city website, which, by the way, you're going to want to do city or county websites for building permits. If you're about to write a non-contingent offer, right, because they already have all this stuff and they give you a list. And one of my other examples, they have a big list of all the repairs that they did. You ought to go to the local building permit website and check the building permits. And what I do once I get them is I do screenshots of all of them that I can download, and I upload them into Gemini. And I say, here are all of these are all the building permits. I usually go back they can go back a long time. Here are all the building permits since they owned it. Compare that to the list of repairs they did. And let me know if there's anything missing, right? The last time I did this was a few months ago. There was a whole bunch of things missing. Things that were on their list of that they had done that should have had a building permit that they did not have a building permit. Liquefaction, right? Now notice it's reading, this is from the NHD report. It's reading the NHD report too, because there was one in the pile. Liquefaction means if there's an earthquake because of the ground being looser than clay or other kinds of ground, it can move back and forth like a liquidy kind of a substance. Now, I've had people say to me, well, I don't want to live on ground that can move when there's an earthquake, like that. Where can I find, and then the answer is, well, at the top of the hill. Yeah, up there. Right, because in valleys, you have dirt that is washed down, sediments. And I mean, that's just the way it is. You could go up to the top of the hill and then you won't have loose sediment, but you'll have landslide. Yeah, oh, all right. It mentions that it's concrete perimeter and slab. They just telling you that that's a very common combination. Slab, of course, is a flat foundation. The concrete perimeter is a concrete perimeter. It talks about the vaping and smoking, if they have to tell you about that. It requires an advisory recommending a electrical system inspection, and it goes on, and it's giving us some general estimates as to what it might cost to get the sewer lateral video, to do the seismic gas valve. water conservation certification. Any questions about that so far? What I'm doing?
So I had a question, Michael.
Yeah,
So for this query, did you use the deep research or just a
that
regular?
one was a regular one because I'd already run a deep
All
research.
right,
The other reason why I didn't do it is because it would take too much time.
right. Okay, got it. And then as a follow-on question, in the past you would use Notebook LM to do
Right.
something similar. So why didn't you use it this time?
Well, the lazy, I mean, that's not probably the best. So what does Notebook LM do that Gemini's deep research doesn't do? And
Right,
the answer is it's not unlimited, but you can have 300 different sources. 300. Now, the maximum number you could load to Gemini at any one time is 10. So if I were to, this is my Notebook LM, and let me see, is this a fun one? So here's one. That's not the craziest one I've got. Everglades, actually, I'm gonna say here, I have way too much stuff. So I'm trying to find one. I have a couple of them where the list of sources just keeps going on and on and on. I mean, and throughout the transaction, there's more. Now, this one's not too bad. Look at this. Okay. Look at that. Now, the reason I use Notebook LM for this is because I was given the disclosures when they went to Homelight to download them. They downloaded them as separate PDFs. Right, which means I end up with 30 of them or something, some ridiculous number, which makes it difficult for Gemini. If I download it as combined PDFs, it creates one document, which Gemini doesn't really care how big it is, right? But it's only one, so it'll upload it. Now, the other thing that deep research will do is that if I have comps and other things, like you notice in the deep research, it researched all the local area disclosures. Now, Notebook LM only knows what I tell it. So it's not researching the internet to come up with answers, right? Whereas Gemini, especially the deep research, will do that. So that's why I typically use Gemini unless I'm giving the documents in a scattered way. In that case, I would use Notebook LM, but then I have Notebook LM create a report which I load into Gemini because I want Gemini to do all of its research stuff, which takes longer. Let me use a different one, if I may. So Morgan Hill, right? And this is two different, and just to show you the difference between the quick one and, so this is an active listing in Morgan Hill. I downloaded the reports today. First of all, I had it do its tell me everything. Here, let me just tell me everything. Now, it did it by everything. This is doing its research on local area disclosures. Notice Morgan Hill has a private sewer lateral certification requirement. Oh, if the property is more than 15 years old. Water conservation. See this utility inspection report? Everywhere in California, you're supposed to have low flow toilets and showers and plumbing fixtures everywhere. But most places, nobody comes and knocks on your door and says, hey, I'm here to, flush your toilet and run your shower and check, right? They don't do that. Some places they do. Santa Cruz County, they send somebody out to check right? Morgan Hill, they want a inspection report done. They need a licensed C36 plumber. Right now, you understand if you're the listing agent in Morgan Hill and you didn't know about these two things and escrow's getting close to closing, you got a problem. Right. And then there's conditionally required ones and all of that. And then this is what Deep Research did, being given the same prompt. And it's talking about, it's going into much greater detail. Morgan Hill has adopted an aggressive environmental infrastructure, that's for sure. The sewer lateral, this is unavoidable, right? Because the property, the time it was built, plumbing fixtures, it's giving more information. It's breaking down the different transfer taxes. It's talking about airport noise, agricultural protections, well water quality. These are all disclosures that can be triggered in Morgan Hill. And let me I spend a lot of my time doing this, by the way.
Michael, I have a question here.
Yeah.
Hi. So I understand that we've put in the disclosures which came in about a property, and then we compared it with the area of around that property of what disclosures could be. But is there one source of truth which we can go back, not depending on AI or just saying that we are just doing our due diligence, that have we missed out on something because it could originate from somewhere or someone might not have been looked at within Gemini specifically?
Well, I'm not sure what you're asking.
So are there any, like, is there any portal or forms which we can look into, or the inspection reports, like if there is any disclosure which might have been missed out, not necessarily going into Gemini, but maybe one source truth like CAR forms gives the disclosures, like all kind of forms, it is available there. So
No,
yeah, okay.
no. For some reason, let me just find this. What is this one? So what does CAR have? 13530. Is that the same one I was doing here? I don't know. Let me just look at it. 13530. 135. I get it is the right one. So, and I think I downloaded this already. But let me. So what does CAR provide us to help? Well, if you go to the CAR website, car.org, and you, that's not there. So you go to car.org and they have a list, like a grid of all the different disclosures that could be required by a particular type of property. It's kind of long, but they have it. Now, what that doesn't contain is local area disclosures. Doesn't have that because that's too much. Now, oftentimes the different associations of realtors, Contra Costa Association, Alameda, Contra Costa Association is a good example, actually has on their website a list of the different local area disclosures. Sometimes you can simply find them by just doing what I did, which is which is a search. Back before we had AI, I would go to Google and type in Fremont local area disclosures.
Okay, got it.
And then I would Now, if I were a member of Bridge MLS, which I'm not, Bridge MLS through the different associations in Alameda and Contra Costa County had their own list of disclosures. If I were to just type in Alameda County local area disclosures, if I just did that, you're gonna see Bay East has a document. Right? Alameda County disclosures and disclaimers,
Hmm.
which was updated in February of 2020.
Okay.
Right? So, yeah, there's that. Hopefully, nothing's changed since February 2020. And so it's not as, and Contra Costa County has their own list of point of sale, which of course, all of this is something that Gemini can go and read.
Okay. Got it.
What,
Understood.
what's mind-boggling to me, Santa Clara County doesn't actually do this. I don't know why.
Hmm.
San Mateo does, but you know, it's a mixed bag. Now, if you wanted to dig deeper, who would know that would talk to you about the different local area disclosures in any given city? They're called escrow officers, particularly the point of sale ones, because that has to be met in order for them to close escrow. So, you know,
Okay.
so I downloaded for this particular property. I'm going to use the quick one. I downloaded the disclosures. I would upload the files. I would say, we have an interested buyer. By the way, if I were doing comps, I would be asking it what it thinks it's going to appraise for. We have an interested buyer. Red flags. It generally knows why I'm asking it. Issues. You know, and then we just. And then some of these, let me just look at, while it's doing that. Oh, thank you very much. Let me log back in. Home light. All right, I'll just do this then. So I've got more information about the property inspections and some of this. One of the ones that I wanted to just make sure I discussed while we're waiting for that one to run. So what's important about the property inspections, right? We're going to get to one of those in a minute, but usually there are certain things that are recommended. In other words, they'll say things like, have an electrician look at this, have a plumber look at this, have a structural engineer look at this. Now, it's not that I've never had a second inspection done, right? So if the seller has an inspection, should I have my inspection company go inspect it? I've had cases where that was valuable. But what you don't want to do is to just end up with a second inspection that says the same thing as the first inspection. So when I'm looking at a property inspection, what I'm looking for is the electrician, the plumber, the all of the different things where they recommend somebody else to come in. Because the property inspector does not tell you how much anything is going to cost. They don't tell you. So that means that how would we know whether or not that was serious? In one of the cases, there were in the garage, there's this great big beam and an enormous crack in the beam. Is that a problem? Well, is it a load-bearing beam? Or is it just a decorative beam? I don't know, right? I had an opinion, but so we had a general contractor come out and he looked at it and he said, that's decorative, it isn't holding up anything. Right, you understand, we are not, unless you're a general contractor, also qualified to say whether or not that horizontal crack in the foundation is more serious than the vertical crack, or that's not. So what I would rather do is from the property inspection, when there's things that they're calling for further inspection, to get a contractor to come and not only look at it, but make a bid. Now, this one is good to see they actually did the work, completed and not completed. So that's nice. And so they paid in full with their Visa card. I'm going to look at the original report in a minute. I believe so. But this is the top of a termite report. And the part that I want to call attention to is this part at the bottom. The report, we called it a termite report, but it isn't necessarily about termites. It's about wood destroying pests or organisms, or pests or organisms, but you know, it's the State Structural Pest Control Board that regulates them. Well, a pest is an insect that eats wood. Two kinds in California, termites, and in some areas of California, they're wood-boring beetles. Yeah, mostly termites. Termites eat wood. There are two kinds of termites. There's the dry wood termites that look like large ants with wings that fly around, the most common. And then there are subterranean termites that live in the ground and they build these little tunnels up, right, from the earth to the wood so that they can eat it. So in this particular case, they marked that there were subterranean termites and dry wood termites. Now, fungus also eats wood, not mold. Mold is not a wood-eating substance. Fungus is. Dry rot, when wood is rotting, what's happening is that microorganisms are eating the wood. So dry rot means you just add water and they're back alive and going at it again. Other findings and further inspection. So one of the first things I do is I quickly look at this, because this is telling me they checked every box. Isn't that special? Right? Everything. Now, when I'm reading it, and this may not be the full report yet, section 1, right? Now, there's two sections of the termite report. There's section 1 and section 2. Section 1 means that there is an infestation currently of wood-destroying pests or organisms. And if you get what's called a section 1 clearance, it means they have to kill all the wood-destroying pests or organisms. They have to kill the termites. They scrape the fungus and treat it with a chemical, which you could, by the way, buy at Home Depot, but anyhow, and any rotted wood has to be replaced because the dry rot are microorganisms sleeping, they're hibernating. So the wood has to be removed and replaced with wood that doesn't have rot. That's section 1. Section 2, and by the way, section 1 is typically required for FHA loans, also required for VA loans. Now, I've had agents argue with me and say, yeah, section 1 is not required for FHA. It's not in the 5,000-page FHA handbook. That's true. It doesn't say you have to have a section 1 clearance, but it says you have to pass a health and safety inspection, which typically means a section 1 clearance. But anyhow, section 2 are items that could lead to an infestation of wood-destroying pests and organisms, but they're not there now. Examples are so common, like if you have a shower and you have a curtain rather than the stall enclosure. Well, the curtain allows more moisture out. So water, moisture, oxygen, wood, you have rot. So if you were to replace the curtain with a stall enclosure, it would reduce the moisture, section 2. If you've got wood, you know, those little wood chips that people think look decorative and they spread them around the outside of the house, that's like chumming for termites. Termites eat wood. It's like pouring bird seed around your house and then complaining that the birds are always there, messing up your patio. Well, don't put bird seed out. So wood chips around the house is also a section 2. Wood, and which is, by the way, on a termite report, they usually refer to wood chips as cellulose debris. Yeah, that's a new term for some of you today. Cellulose debris. And in a crawl space, if you see pieces of wood, sawdust kind of stuff, cellulose debris, that's section 2. Now, normally section 1 is what we need to get done. If it's a VA loan, they want to see section 2. So look at this. This is a really long explanation of the subterranean termites. There's dry wood termites. You usually don't see dry wood termites flying around, although it's possible. What you see are droppings from the termites, which looks like sand. In fact, the old joke used to be that when the termite person would come out, you wanted to inspect their pockets, because the old line is they would fill their pockets up with sand, and when nobody's looking, they would spread it around and say, "Oh my God, there's termites." But typically that's how we know they're there. Plus you can see they've been nibbling on things, and occasionally that they fly around. Section 2. The attic or sub area contains significant exposed wood that is conducive to infestation, right? That's section 2. Fungus, there's a fungus among us. Subfloor bathrooms contain significant conducive, this is section 2. Other findings, carpenter ants. Maybe the carpenter ants would fix the, but they don't eat wood. I had one of the companies that I worked for, and their name was, I'm not going to say the first part, but it was something exterminators. And one of my clients had wasps in their garage. And they asked if I knew of anybody that could, get rid of the wasps. And so I called my termite company up, the exterminators, and I said, do you kill wasps? And the guy said, "Do wasps eat wood?" I'm like, I don't think so. He said, "We don't kill them then, because they don't eat wood. We only kill those things that eat wood." So in this particular case, $3,210 is section 1. That's light. I'm just telling you, right? That's pretty light. That's a termite report. Now, a lot of times, this is probably the original one, right? Because they've been doing repairs and doing repairs. Let me see if I can see. When I'm looking at a termite report, the 2 things I do first, as I mentioned, is I look at this list here to see how many boxes are checked. And then I scroll. It should be before this. I scrolled to the end. I may have scrolled too far. I scrolled to the end of the report. Maybe not the last page, but close to the last page, is where they add everything up. And this is a copy of the contract. I'm not going to spend a lot of time finding it, but if you scroll to the end of the termite report, they break out. Section 1 is this, section 2 is that. So I want to know quickly, what do they have? Subterranean, dry wood, fungus, rot, everything. How much, right? How much? And that's oftentimes done at the part that's called work authorization, which is at the end of the termite report. And then it tells you the exact number, which, by the way, if I really wanted to know that, Gemini has read it and could tell me as well. Right now, I asked it about all the inspections. It's explaining that there was an active infestation, that there was a recent fumigation. There's a significant history of pest activity. The roof condition, flashings are near the end of their useful life. Now it's reading the property inspection, the garage condensation unit, the foundation, common hairline cracks are observed. A more specific crack was noted in the interior foundation wall of the garage. More specific, right? That might be something that would be called for a further investigation. The home has an electrical 1 amp service, which may be considered low. Like if you want to add an EV charger or high draw, appliances. You get the idea. Duct wrapping is consistent with materials that have asbestos. It was built before 1977, which means it probably has lead-based paint. It's in a dam inundation area. It's in Morgan Hill. Yeah, we're all in the funny. I think this is humorous, but you may disagree. The thing about Morgan Hill is that most of the homes are in a dam inundation area, which means if the Anderson Dam or some other dams were to, lose it, we would all be flooded. However, we're also in a high fire zone. Best case scenario is everything's on fire and then the dam breaks, right? And then we'd be inundated with water. It would put out the fire. And yes, I need a better life. I know. Anyhow, it talks about the Mellarus. There's a public, so you get the idea, recommendations for the buyer. And it even is asking me about a repair request, which we're not necessarily going to do at this point. I don't know if that was helpful. My outline goes through all the different things. I have links to more, involved on the NHD. For me, the reading of the reports are what I think is important. Analyzing the HOA documents, all of that. Any questions, thoughts?
Just one quick thing about the termites. From my own experience, I don't remember if you mentioned anything about like the warranty on their service, but I lucked out because we had our fumigation and treatment, and then I found subterranean termites like about a year later. And fortunately, in our agreement, there was a warranty on their service, so they were able to come over and finish it up. And then I've since started using Terminex to come over yearly to put in like the ground baits every year, just because termites are so aggressive in my area that I don't know. That's also something I would recommend to a homeowner if there is prior activity. The Terminex plan is pretty affordable. It's like $300 a year.
Yeah.
But yeah, that warranty in the agreement really saved us there from having a nasty problem.
Yeah. Of the how long was the warranty? Usually they're 2 years.
I think it was 2 years, if I remember correctly. Yeah.
My belief is that the 2-year warranty is required by the State Structural Pest Control Board. And by the way, you can go get copies of past termite reports in the last 2 years. Now, I'm going to just close with one comment about the repair request. So the question is, like, you've got all this stuff, right? And it's $30,000 to fix the foundation and everything else. The question is, has the price already been reduced to reflect the condition of the property? Right? That's why we want to talk about comparables at the same time. Because if they've already reduced the price, then asking for them to reduce the price again because of the repair work is sort of double dipping. Anyhow, that's all I got for today. I'm going to talk about fire hardening, defensible space, and some other really fun things, but that's going to be on Thursday. I'll see you all there. All right. Bye.
All right. Thank you, Michael.
Thank you. Thank you,
Thank you.
Michael. Bye.
Bye.
Thanks, Mike.